Great. Okay, so things don't always go according to plan in this current world that now exists primarily over the interwebs. We're meant to be broadcasting to you live, but this is now turned into a pre-record. For those of you who just watched Quite Contrary on our YouTube channel, hope you enjoyed the show. I'm going to be having a bit of a chat with the director of the show, Debra Batton. Before we get started, I should probably introduce myself. My name's Sal. I'm one of the trainers at Women's Circus and have been kicking around for a long time, long enough to have been around to have seen this show when it was staged in the meat market. Don't know how we actually all fit in the venue. So many people involved. But before we kind of dig into that any further, I do want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I want to pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So I am joined today by the fabulous Debra Batton, who directed Quite Contrary. Deb, how are you going, mate?
Sal, I am very well, and I would just like to acknowledge that I'm on the lands of the Bunurong people, and like you, I acknowledge that their sovereignty was never ceded.
Thanks, Deb.
Yeah, I'm very well, given these strange, and shall I say the word, unprecedented times.
Unprecedented times. Yes, the new abnormal. It's still, like, people are talking about it, the new normal. There's nothing normal about this. You know, it's lovely to see your face. I'm used to being in the same room with you when we catch up, but lucky to be able to do this anyway. And also, you know, enjoying the fact that we're getting to share all our archive with the community, which is something that I'm guessing would not have happened this year if we weren't under current circumstances. Yeah. I was watching the show. I actually watched it a week before we put it up, and that was a year that I sort of wasn't working very much at Women's Circus. I had some family stuff happen and I took a little bit of time out. But I remember coming back in and just seeing so many people on stage and a lot of people I hadn't met yet, which was, you know, it was just great to see so many new faces and people engaging with the community. And I remember from that time, I remember meeting you, Deb, and when you came in and you were introduced to the community, you talked about how great it was for you to be working with people who were, this wasn't a job for them. The reason, like, it was a community circus and we're all doing circus because we just kind of have to, and that you were excited about that. And I thought that would be a really nice way to kind of kick off as a kind of reintroduction, I guess, to the community now, just to touch on that a little bit.
Great, yeah, thanks, Sal. I do remember that too, and it was, you know, I'd come out of being the artistic director of a company and all of the wonderful things that go with that. And I'd had a bit of time out before, you know, coming to Women's Circus, and I just felt the pleasure of working with people who do it around all of their other jobs, and you know, they put a lot of effort into just being able to get to that class that they do or those classes that they do, and yet when they're there, the effort disappears, and they're there with this enthusiasm and drive and care for each other that was just extraordinary to be part of. And I just loved that, and I really wanted to capture that. It just didn't matter what level you're at. It was the sort of working together was what made circus so special with working at the Women's Circus.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you on that one, mate. It's, you know, I feel incredibly fortunate not only to have been able to teach in that environment for as many years as I have, but to be able to continue doing so now is pretty special. Yeah, it's we've still got this wonderful, thriving community, even though I guess it's that whole together apart thing.
Yeah.
I just, you mentioned before about having come from being artistic director of a company before that. I just, you've had a long and illustrious circus career, mate. What first drew you to circus? Let's have a little look at the very beginning of the journey and maybe look at some highlights.
Wow, it's a convoluted kind of answer, which, just interrupt if it gets boring. Because really, I'd have to say that it goes back to my gymnastics as a child. And, without knowing it at the time, gymnastics was this thing where I realized that most of my intelligence was in my body. Um, and I didn't really understand that until I stopped doing it.
Yeah,
And
right.
then and didn't realize how much I would miss the use of my body as a sort of primary source of my expression. And that led me to doing dance at university at Rusden, which was an education degree. So it was this kind of accidental discovery, really. And once I went into dance, this kind of world of the performing arts opened up to me. Um, because Rusden at that time was quite eclectic in the way it thought about dance. It wasn't sort of everybody has to learn this technique. It was about making dance and the avant-garde in dance and how that connected with the avant-garde in theatre and circus and all of those things. And
Fantastic. I feel like that sounds like a good fit for you, mate.
yeah, well, look, it was sort of like I went, oh, I didn't know this existed. I'd been a sporty type. My family hadn't ever really considered the arts as something that we were a part of. And so it was like just a whole new world opened up to me. And, and from there, I basically followed my nose. I took opportunities when they were there, chucked myself into stuff that I was probably not really ready for. And sank or swam, really. And, I just kind of gathered skills and information as I
Mm,
went, and people sort of would say, oh, would you come and do this? Basically I said yes to anything that came my way. Um,
fantastic.
and that took me eventually to Circus Oz and then to Legs on
Fantastic.
the Wall.
Yeah. So when you were saying before about being artistic director of a company, was that Legs on the Wall?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that was Legs on the Wall for 10 years. Yeah.
I remember working as one of the stage managers in the Big Top during the Commonwealth Games Festival and sneaking across the road when I was off shift to go and see Legs on the Wall, literally with their legs on the wall, with
On the
all
case.
the harness running and stuff, with the projected images on the side wall of the arts centre.
Yeah, it was called On the Case, that show. And yeah, was working with an animator who lives in Natimuck, Dave Jones. Uh, Fabulous animator. He's just incredible. And a co-director from the UK, Mark Murphy. So it was an incredible sort of team event that made that show. Um, and it was a show of scale that nearly killed all of us.
Well, that sounds exciting, Deb.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it was wonderful, but it is that thing, isn't it, where when you always kind of tend to overreach, it can be exhausting. And in some ways, I think it wasn't long after that where I just really needed to walk away and take a rest and sort of reinvent myself. Partly because I found the role of artistic director also started to become much more about creative producer than artist. It was about strategy
Yeah.
uh, and I really wanted to get back in touch with myself as an artist.
So, Women's Circus,
Women's circus.
quite contrary, was the first show that you did, but I feel like that led to a few other projects, such
Yeah,
as Hot Flush, I believe it was.
red hot flush.
Red Hot
That
Flush.
was
I knew I
red
was
hot
missing something
flush.
there.
Yeah, look, it was interesting because when I came and worked at the Women's Circus, I was taking a performance class, and that became one of the acts in the show. And quite a few members of that class were older, And that led to me then running a group for women who were sort of 50 plus. Um, Rather than it being aged, I wanted it to be about whether you were menopausal or not. But you know, forcing people to have a blood test, that just seemed a bit extreme. Like, so we went kind of with around, you had to be around 50, and it was a very deliberate thing to sort of work with the body that is in that sort of perimenopause to menopause stage, and to be able to sort of share with each other what was happening around that time. And that's what led to creating Red Hot Flush. So, you know, the Quite Contrary was first.
Yeah.
And just jumping back a bit to Quite Contrary, like one of the things I loved about Quite Contrary was this sort of contrariness of being in the meat market. You know, that was partly what inspired the name, because it sort of seemed to me like a group of women being in a meat market was a very sort of contrary thing to do. Like, and then to sort of just take over the meat market because of the sheer numbers of us, and to take over whether we could only do a forward roll or whether we were still doing, or whether we were learning sort of much higher level skills, just became a wonderful celebration of the body, and taking the woman's body, and kind of celebrating it.
Awesome.
I just wanted to get that in before we
Yeah, no, absolutely. Please feel free to interrupt me with anything you'd like to chuck in there. In terms of contrariness, I'm actually wearing this shirt in honour of Quite Contrary. It's quite contrary to my usual palette.
Love it.
So that's what's going on there. Also, maybe I feel like in terms of the technical issues that we're having this evening, I do feel like that TV screen when you're waiting for something to come on. So maybe it's not so contrary after all.
Yeah, yeah.
I just also was thinking about, we can keep coming back to Quite Contrary. But things that I've been thinking about, and we had a brief chat before we sort of came on air, as you would, about, you know, where things have been lately for you, and how one of the important creative relationships you have in your life at the moment is with Spencer Inwood, who's one of your A Good Catch castmates and creators. And from what I know, that is a relationship that I kind of saw blossoming at Women's Circus in the creative development of not just Quite Contrary, but Red Hot Flush and Snakes and Ladders.
Yeah, look, quite right. I had met Spencer when she was a child, and I was at Legs on the Wall, and I kind of knew of her, but we re-met at Women's Circus. So Spencer was an aerial trainer at the time, and we used to enjoy lots of conversations as we were crossing paths. And, you know, Spencer just became someone who was asking lots of questions and offering to help. And so I really enjoyed bringing her alongside me in helping to sort of craft the shows. And with Snakes and Ladders, I kind of finished Snakes and Ladders and said, I will never make another show without you. Because she had that wonderful ability to sort of see what the potential of the work was. And she's got this incredible spatial memory. And I always sort of say, as a director, one of the best skills that you can do is to get people around you that have strengths that are different to yours. And, you know, because you can't be everything as a director. And I think one of the things I've always done is kind of valued people who have skills that I don't have, and embrace them, so that they and delegate to them, you know, so that because the role of the director is so broad and so big, and you can't be an expert in all aspects of it.
Yeah,
and you know, really found that Spencer had skills in areas that were my weaknesses, and so yeah, it became a wonderful collaboration, and has definitely been a big part of us coming together to work together now with A Good Catch, along with Sharon Grunert.
Yeah, which is just such a fabulous. I've seen the show once. I was unfortunate enough to see it. I saw it on my birthday when Spencer had a ankle injury in the middle of the show, and just the the way that you were able to come back on and improvise and work through stuff, you know, just without getting a chance to rehearse, it was incredible. Yeah, amazing show. I know that a lot of our community has seen that show and has raved about it. It's certainly in a lot of people's top 5 lists, I reckon. So yeah, definitely up there and near the top of mine. So but just, yeah, thinking about, like, that's a thing that's happening now. Obviously we don't know what's happening with The Good Catch at the moment. COVID times are pretty interesting and bizarre, and you know, obviously we're experiencing that with Women's Circus as well. We just watched Quite Contrary, a show with 96 performers involved. What are your thoughts on where we can go with that, and what's the likelihood of having so many bodies creating together? Where do we go, mate? Any thoughts?
Look, I don't know. Isn't it fascinating how we've had to sort of rethink what we do and how we do it, and you know, it feels like a tragedy to me that we've had to embrace this digital world so much, except for the fact that I don't know if I'm alone, but I cannot wait to be able to spend less time in front of a screen and more time with real bodies. And so I'm hoping that as we are able to safely do that, you know, the steps will be small, I'm sure, but step by step, I'm hoping I'm not alone, and that there will be the desire for people to get together. Hopefully, you know, I can really see a place for outdoor performance.
Yep.
Partly because it's safer to be outdoors when we're around people at the moment. And, you know, one of the wonderful things about outdoor performance is it's harder to ticket, and maybe that's going to create more of these sort of free performances in public spaces, which is going to also build audiences, you know, to perhaps come back to theatres when they eventually reopen. You know, that's my sort of most positive outlook.
Yep.
That yeah, you know, venues often also have an outdoor environment, and maybe one of the ways they can reconnect with their members or their audiences is to think about shows that could be done outdoors, and circus can be done outdoors, you know.
100%, mate.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great to see that sort of investment in free work outdoors, just so that people start to stick their toe in the water again and go, you know, you're going to be spread out. You could imagine picnic blankets as the answer.
Do you know, it's interesting because I mentioned before about the Commonwealth Games, the Arts and Cultural Festival that happened around the same time as that. Everything was free. Most of it was outdoors. And it was an incredible time. It was so incredible. I actually forgot that there was this enormous sporting event on. At the same time, I remember riding into work one day and I stopped to get some water. I left my water bottle at home, stopped at the servo, and the guy at the servo saw my bike helmet and was like, "We're doing very well in the cycling." And I just looked at him like, what is he talking about? And I was just, oh, that's right. Big, massive sport thing happening. I was just thinking about this incredible arts festival that was on, you know, and it got there was so many people there who just would not usually go and see live performance. It was incredible.
There were queues everywhere for those live shows. People, you know, and you just see what happens when people don't have to pay $60 for a ticket. Yep. You know, they want to come, and you know, I think that's something that we need greater investment in. Really, is
give the people art
and make it accessible and affordable.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, it's just so tricky for people to take the risks with the arts that I think they're happy to take. If it's affordable or free, much better.
Yeah, absolutely. I am aware of the fact that we're going to be going up late because we can't put this up live this evening for some technical reason. So just like before we finish up, I just wanted to see if there was anything in particular that you wanted to touch on that we haven't touched on yet, or if there is a particular highlight or a challenge from coming in, and like just to maybe bring it back to Quite Contrary itself.
Yeah. Well, I think, Quite Contrary developed very much through an idea of allowing anyone who wanted to be in the work to be in it, and to try to sort of use classes as a structure to create the show rather than a story. And that created a lot of challenges, because we were also trying to find ways in which we weren't just in little bubbles of classes, but that there was a language that everybody learnt, which is where the sort of holding people back sort of came in. And I think one of the other things I'd really like to bring up was a wonderful collaboration with Naima Fine.
I just had exactly the same thought. The music was amazing. Naima did an incredible job.
She really did, and she really went on the journey with me in terms of the experiments that we were taking, and I guess that's, for me, that's what it's about these days. I want to experiment with the art form. I don't want to just sort of make stuff that I know works.
Yep.
And Quite Contrary was sort of a beginning point for me with that. I didn't know how the show would come together, but I did feel a lot of love for the people who were there in front of me, giving everything a good shot, and going, taking the experiments on. And Naima was one of those people. She was amazing.
Yep.
Di, the general manager, was fabulous, and Dawn, who was helping with all the tech work. I mean, there were these people who got around that project and held it together, and kept it chugging forward, even as we got delayed with the bump in, and we lost time for things which caused stresses on everybody. But
and you didn't have a huge amount of time in the lead up to that show either, really. Like, for considering the size of the cast, and how many classes. Clearly, there were a lot of classes going on at the time. There were quite a few new skills had been introduced, as was mentioned, I think, by David and Margay. Doors had been thrown wide to Women's Circus. There'd been waiting lists for years for people to get in to the new crew program, which there were only a limited number of spaces. But after we had kind of moved into the drill hall, it was like, it's time to just let everyone in, and we just put on way more new crew classes than we'd had in the past. Yeah. And so lots of people very, very new to circus and new to making live performance, and a new show director with not very much. Like, it's a pretty extraordinary feat, right?
Thank you very much. It was a really fabulous time, and I feel like I've got really great friends from my period at Women's Circus, and they, I don't necessarily see them regularly, but when I do see them, it feels like we've been through something together that was really special, and they remain special to me. Especially that crew from Red Hot Flush. They're badass women.
Yeah. That's great. Well, I'll take it from the badass Deb Batton. But I do know the folks of whom you speak, and I'll be like, yes, absolutely. It's inspiring for me as someone who's been around. I remember sort of being like, I can join POW in like 14 years. I've now been able to. I could have joined POW 4 years ago. But yeah, just to know that I can hang around. I can just keep hanging around and keep doing the thing, and have been inspired by all of these people who've stayed on and stayed in there through menopause, etc. Before me. So
yeah, great.
Yeah, thanks so much for chatting with us tonight, mate. It's so lovely to see your face. I'm certainly
colours.
Like I said, contrary to usual. Though Deb and I usually often see each other in bright red t-shirts.
We do.
Just a Women's Circus has got the black, which is why this is Quite Contrary. There is another place where we both get to spend time together, where we usually wear a bright red t-shirt. I would fade into the backdrop there. It's just so great to catch up. I'm really loving these opportunities for the Q&A, because it means I get to hang out with glorious people that I haven't seen for a long time. So Thanks so much for taking the time, mate. And I'm really glad that you got to watch it and, you know, go back and sort of revisit that time yourself, and that it was mostly a very nice memory train for you.
Oh, it really was. It really was. I had a lot of pleasure in doing it, and in seeing all of those people. Yeah, it was a treat.
Great. Awesome. And I'm sure it'll be likewise from them. We'll have to check the comments later because we're not live anymore.
No.
But we're going to wrap it up so people can start watching it. So, folks, thank you so much for joining us. We have one more of our Sunday Circus Cinema sessions left for this season, whatever that means. So yeah, next month we'll be looking at Pope Joan, this will be the first time we're doing a show that I haven't even seen yet. So I'm looking forward to watching it,
Yeah.
and we'll see who we end up chatting with next month. Thanks, folks. Bye.